And I always wanted to start my own thing. I have so much drive and I would love to be the one to truly make all of these decisions and steer the direction of a company that it was always on my mind. I wish I would have worried less and just trusted the process and known that, whatever decision you make, right? It's exactly where you're meant to be. And going back to your point about when I talked about being good at sales and those reasons why, and you're that applies to every single industry. That's probably my biggest takeaway in all of this, right? Is that all of these skills are transferable.
Welcome to the show, and we've got one to share today. One of the most informational podcasts we've ever done. 3 career changes and how to jump into all of them. We've got Samantha Gold on the show today, and that's right. She's changed her career 3 times. She's going to talk about how to jump from passion to passion. She's been in tech. She's been in fashion, and we've got a little roadmap on how to get into both of those. And finally, Samantha's an entrepreneur, and she's going to talk about how she found her idea, how she launched her idea, and some of the steps she took to make it work out. Welcome to the show, and welcome to the Edge of Excellence. Well, Samantha Gold, thank you so much for making time out of your busy morning, because you're down in Sydney and I'm up in the LA area, to share your story on the Edge of Excellence.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here today.
I do have to pause and tell you that the last person I recorded an episode with was from Australia, and he has a business in the US, so vice versa to you. And I spent the entire time coming up with Australian jokes and calling him a Kiwi. I will leave all of that out of this podcast today because we've got some cool stuff to talk about. Samantha went from college to tech and big company to fashion to entrepreneurship. And we're going to talk about how you get into tech, how you get into fashion, and then change and how you get into being an entrepreneur. Shop Motet. Oh, you know what? I don't even know how to say it right. Is it Motet?
Motet.
Motet. Holy moly. I got a yellow flag myself. ShopMotet.com. If you want to reach Samantha, you can go check out ShopMotet.com. If you have kids that want stylish, functional sleep and play essentials, you can go to shopmotet.com, and we're going to get into all that. But before we do, Samantha, I got to know, what's your definition of excellence?
My definition of excellence is doing something that you love, that doesn't feel like a job, that you're super passionate about, and gets you excited to get up and get going every single day.
So that could be a sport, that could be a hobby, that could be entrepreneurship. Oh my goodness. And were you excited to get up and go to work every day and other jobs too?
Not always.
Well, you never always are. That's a fallacy. No one is always excited to go to work most of the time.
Yeah, I would say most of the time.
Most of the time. But nothing's quite as exciting as starting your own business in a foreign land. I can't even imagine. Down there in Australia. Well, we're going to get into that. Created, what do you mean by alongside 1,500 moms? What was this community that you used to build your business?
Yeah, definitely. So my inner mom circle really happened organically. I decided to, about a year ago, when I made the move from my last role into launching Motet, it was about a year-long process, and I did it publicly on social media. And so what happened organically was I was sharing what I was working on. And then I started inviting moms who were really connecting with my, mission, which was, moms who were tired of cheesy prints and wanted really elevated basics for their babies and toddlers. I started to truly co-create the brand with them. And in doing so, I would add them to my close friends on Instagram. So it's kind of a private community of people where today I still involve them in the process of designing future collections and helping me make decisions. I mean, right now, for instance, I'm looking at the next 12 months and some exciting collaborations with artists or other interior designers that share my vision and my aesthetic. And so I set a question on my inner circle saying, hey, who are some women that I should collaborate with? And then they share their ideas with me. And so It's been actually very cool because my brand is completely US based. And with me being in Australia, I can oftentimes feel like I'm literally on an island, right? But it makes me feel really connected to all of the moms who, 80% of them on launch day, or 80% of my sales on launch day, because we just launched in March, actually came from moms in my inner circle. So I think it really just highlights the importance of, if you're an entrepreneur, like building a community around you, and how helpful that can be in terms of getting business insights, and driving sales as well.
Wow. Okay, so we're going to get deeper into that. That's actually fascinating. And I also, now that you're saying this, we're going to have to get into tariffs and we're going to have to talk about that because that's timely. By the way, today, this we record early. So today is the day we got the new Pope. I was once Catholic, still kind of stoked that we got American Pope from Chicago, which is where Samantha's from. So we're going to go way back to Chicago, Samantha.
Let's
Where'd you go
do
to
it.
high school? What was going on? Were you already kicking ass like you are now, coming up with crazy ideas, headed into Salesforce? Or were you just kind of screwing around and you figured it out
No,
later?
no, definitely not. I think I've always been really hardworking. I've always been a top performer, high achieving. I did really well just athletically and academically. I was definitely like pushed in that direction. I had a mom who was also a strong female, a female employee in the corporate world, and a leader, in different various financial institutions. And so I definitely had that role model.
Hmm.
Um, and so I was involved in, every extracurricular under the sun. I grew up on the North Shore of Chicago and went to Lake Forest High School.
Okay. Well, shout out to mom. What's mom's name?
Julia. And speaking
Julia.
of Chicago, there's a publication called Sheridan Road, which is distributed to 220,000 homes on the North Shore, and I will be in their November issue. I actually grew up on Sheridan Road myself, so I'm
Sheridan Road.
excited
Okay.
for
Well,
that
shit.
little publication.
And when's it coming out, you said?
November. And I'm a
November. Okay. Mark, if you're listening right now, don't do it while you're driving. Pull over. Mark your calendars. If you're in the Chicagoland area, pick that up. And so what sports were you playing? So your mom's saying, "Hey, we're gonna go. This family's going," and you're buying in, you're not arguing. So you're lucky you got a good role model. Some people don't get that.
Yeah.
Sometimes even if you have a good role model, you're not listening, you're fighting, like my daughter. And by the way, I'm recording from home. She's up there, totally not listening to me, not getting a job, even though I'm doing a podcast about how to get a job. But you're listening, you're paying attention. What sports are you playing?
So I played soccer, basketball, and volleyball.
Oh,
Three
wow. Which was your
Yeah,
favorite?
soccer, I would say.
Do you still play?
I play with my kids at home. I did play until my 20s, actually, on a co-ed league, which was so much fun. But honestly, now, like the games were so late at night,
Yeah.
and I go to bed at like 8.
By the way, I know that most of the audience is in their 20s. You think your parents might be dorky. You're hearing how it happens. You start off cool, and then these kids and their diapers and they're waking up in the middle of the night. You made your parents less cool. Well, my wife did co ed soccer. She played soccer in college and then did co ed soccer and then stopped for a little bit because of COVID and is getting back in. Soccer's the gift that keeps on giving. So if you're playing in college, fine. If you're not playing in college, probably even better. You got more free time, but don't give up on soccer. And then academically, you're balancing your soccer, your academics. Did you also have a job? Come on, tell me your mom made you get a job.
Oh yeah, I always had a job.
Perfect.
I mean, I think I started as like a mommy helper, like mommy's aide when I was 11, honestly, helping take care of kids.
Okay, so you're hitting a home run, and we measure this at College Works. If you've worked 30 hours a week or more, 3 years a week or more, played varsity sports, got above a 3.0. I thought it'd be higher. It's not 3.5, 3.7. Tested with 30,000 people above a 3.0 and picked a tough major, 256% more successful if you can say yes to five than three. And if you can't say yes to any of those, you're probably not listening to this podcast. So you're kicking ass in high school and you're
Yeah,
off to college. Let me guess where you went. I'm going to guess, should have asked you this one. I'm going to guess University of Michigan.
University of Wisconsin, but so close.
Oh, one of my favorites. Okay. And I don't know if you know this, you moved out of this place to go down to Sydney, which is pretty beautiful. But Madison keeps getting ranked the number one most Beautiful city and best place to live in America. Did you know
Wow.
that?
I did not know that. It is a beautiful place to live, besides during the cold winter months, but
You gotta love the winter. See, I live in California. It's 74 here all the time. The beach is right there. And
that's
I go
more
to
my
Wisconsin. No, no, no. I
vibe.
go to Wisconsin in the summer. I got my camera out. Everyone's making fun of me while I'm taking pictures of the farmhouses. And then in the winter, I mean, I don't live there, but it's kind of a nice change and the ice fishing and the snowmobiling. Okay, so you're freezing your ass up off, eating cheese curds, no longer playing soccer. Were you playing soccer?
No, I was doing I actually joined a sorority, and I was doing some touch football, which was super fun with the
Okay.
with the
So
the frat brothers.
okay, so staying active, staying involved. And were you
Oh yeah,
working in
always.
college too while you're going to a very tough school?
I was working during the summer. I
Okay.
always had internships every single summer.
And were you in internships? Because we got to get into this tech thing. We got to get into this fashion thing. Were the interns always in tech? Internships always in
No,
tech or
not
fashion?
no. And I think, you didn't ask this, but I'm sure it will be interesting to your listeners. I was someone who, like, putting my ego aside, I was very good at a lot of things, and I was very passionate about a lot of things. And so I really struggled as an 18-year-old to figure out what I wanted to major in.
Mhm.
And so my advice to someone listening to this who might be in a similar situation is, um, it really doesn't matter what you study at the end of the day and where you end up. Like, I think as long as you do it, and as long as you're hardworking, and as long as it's something that you're passionate about, like, don't get too focused on you need to have this one degree or major and that's going to dictate where you end up for the rest of your life. So I actually wanted to be a veterinarian. So, like,
Okay.
totally unrelated to anything that I ended up doing. And so I did 3 years of a zoology degree. Uh,
Okay.
like, wild, right? And I was super passionate about animals, and I still am my whole life. And I actually, at different points in my life, have fostered animals, have volunteered at different animal shelters. And so I think there's ways that you can, in terms of on the side, bring in those passions that don't necessarily have to be your career. And so what ended up happening was I studied abroad in Sydney, Australia when I was 20. The
Mm,
University of Wisconsin had a study abroad program in Sydney. And when I came here, I really realized that I didn't want to be a vet anymore. And again, I was so confused about, like, what I should do, what was the right major, what really aligned with that. So I ended up switching to a business degree, but I
okay.
knew that I would have to do an extra, like, semester or two at the University of Wisconsin, and I was loving it in Sydney. And so I actually decided to stay here and
Oh,
transfer here, and finished my degree at the University of New South Wales, and graduated with a business degree in the end.
wow. Okay. So you went down to Sydney. You loved
Yeah.
Sydney so much. You must have hated that cold. Hated that cold up there. You moved down to Sydney. And I don't know, how do you even get a visa? How do you do that?
So it's pretty easy with a student visa.
Yeah, yeah.
They
I'm not
give
a
those
student
out
anymore.
very freely, because you're paying international international prices for those courses
Okay,
versus Australians. It's
okay.
a much lower rate. But I got a student visa based on first the study abroad program, and then transferring here. I was still on the student visa, so that was great. It is, however, more challenging to stay here and
Yeah.
work full time, especially as someone actually over 30.
Yeah.
If you're under 30, you can apply for a working holiday visa for a year, and you usually get it no problem. But if you're over 30, you have to be, like, sponsored by a company.
Okay, so you got Salesforce to sponsor you to stay after college.
Exactly. So,
And I used to, in one of my past lives, I was chairman of the board of this group called the Entrepreneurs Organization. And so I've got lots of friends that have had business down in Australia and still do. Still do. Shout out to Carlo. If you ever, I have a whole Melbourne audience because of Carlo Santoro. We love that crazy, freaky
amazing.
dude. He's a freaky little dude. Um, but they always get kicked out after 5 years. They work and they build their business after 5 years, their visa's over, and then they're gone. How do you prevent that from happening? We're getting granular here, but I'm
I
interested
don't
and it's my show.
I don't know why they wouldn't have applied. So after you've been here for 2 years, you can actually apply for permanent residency. And so
Mm,
that is, I did not do that back then. My husband and I and kids have only been back now for about a year.
Okay.
And we
And
are
your husband's
actually,
American too?
he is American and he works for
Um,
Zendesk, also in tech or
okay.
now in tech. And Zendesk has sponsored our family to be here.
Okay.
Um,
Okay. Okay.
but that visa is totally linked to his company. So if he was to get let go or find another job, another company could take over that visa.
Mhm.
But he would need them to do so. He couldn't just go work for any employer. It's all tied to the visa.
Okay.
After 2 years, we can apply for permanent residency. And then after 2 years, 2 or 3 years, we can apply for citizenship. So it's
Okay.
like about a 5 year process to get citizenship.
Okay. So something happened with a few of my buddies in that citizenship process, but they might not have been from America. So they're also, and the laws may have changed back then. But that's interesting. If you're still listening here, get back into it because we're going to get right. I'm sorry about that. I'm very interested in international business, and that's a little insight into what you need to do in any country. You want to go work in any country, you got to start with a visa. You got to think about if you can keep your visa. You got to think about how you're going to stay there. So you
My
are there.
advice to anyone listening who wants to go work in another country actually would be to start locally. I'm imagining most of the listeners are American. My advice would be start locally working for like a larger American corporation that has global operations and then do really well. And then after a year or two, and plant that seed with your manager, right? Like have those conversations early and say, this is a goal of mine and have them get you there because it's a lot easier to be transferred internally or promoted internally. They're taking less of a risk on you once you've proven yourself as a top performer to be able to get to where you want to be.
So if you're already working, go talk to your manager now if you're interested in that. If you're not working while you're searching, it's always easier to start big and go small in the corporate world. Search for those companies and see if they have those opportunities. Because if you're going to UW Madison and you've got this great resume and you're getting great grades again, and you're playing, it wasn't slosh ball. What was the sport you're playing? Flag football with the frat bros, eating the cheese curds. Don't forget about the cheese curds. You have a good resume. You can get what you want. Might as well go for all of it. It takes a little while. So you're in college, you're graduating, and you decide to go work for Salesforce. And how many companies did you look at to find Salesforce?
So I will say that I was like very lucky in terms of
Oh,
like, and
don't you do it. I got to get my yellow flag. You're getting a yellow flag or a yellow card. Yellow card. Do not tell me that it was like the first or second application you turned in. Don't do it.
So here's what happened, right? And I think again, it's luck and hard work. If you are working hard
Okay.
and you're proving yourself, then opportunities are going to come to you.
Yeah,
And
success is luck. If you're prepared when opportunity knocks, you're in. So you're traveling abroad, you're doing all these internships in the summer, you're taking some weird, crazy degree and switching and still doing well. They love all that stuff. You probably got
right.
some
So it
extra
wasn't
magic.
So what happened was I was actually interning with the Commonwealth Bank of Australia with their Women in Focus department, which is it's
Mhm.
wild because it's all about empowering women in business and small businesses, which is fast forward full circle where I am today.
Yeah.
Um, but I ended up, and again, it's all networking, right? I ended up going to drinks after work with some of my friends who were private bankers and their clients, and one of them happened to be a Salesforce partner, and it was an American who owned this company and he and I started talking and he was like, "Have you ever thought about a career in sales? Like you'd be fantastic at that." And I honestly had not. Like I think it's starting to gain more prevalence now in terms of being like a major in college or something that you could pursue. But it's something I think growing up you hear of, people who work in sales, but it just wasn't really talked about, at least with me openly about being a potential career. But I think it made so much sense as someone who's super social and driven and like articulate and enjoys, presenting and being in front of people and leading and kind of that project management being like task oriented. It really aligned with all of these skills. And this person was the
By
first
the way,
person.
there's no job that doesn't align with a person like that. But keep going.
Oh, you're right, 100%.
Yeah.
And so he said to me, come and work for me. And like, I'll take you under my wing and I'll sponsor you to stay in this country and like, let's go. And
Wow.
so like, and so I, like the opportunity really came to me. At that point, I thought I was going to go back to the United States after graduating college.
Oh,
Um, and it truly like fell in my lap in terms of just, I think it can be really hard to get sponsored by companies, overseas. And it truly like this person, saw this opportunity in me, and I think saw themselves in me a little bit and were willing to take a risk on that. And so I was there for about a year and a half working for this partner of Salesforce, and then learning everything about Salesforce and building my network within Salesforce itself. So it was a very natural fit for me to move to Salesforce. Which, by the way, for those listening, I interviewed with Salesforce about 6 months into this role working for the partner, and they said, come back to us in a year when you have a bit more experience. And I
Mm,
did, and I
mm.
followed up, and I did, and I got that experience, and then I got the job.
Okay, so
And
let me just sum up the system because
yeah,
we got to put this in bullet points. Again, if you're driving right now, don't be writing while you're driving. Okay, so here's all you got to do. Do your best in school. Go out there and crush it. Try new things. Don't sit at home. Do sports. Do get a job while you're in school. Join a club. Join a sorority or fraternity. Get a leadership position there. Then in the summers, you got to do shit. You can't sit around Kennedy upstairs in your dad's house doing nothing, talking to your friend. Go get a job. And getting a job might take 50, might take 100 applications. It's a 20-hour a week job. Then, if you listen to step number 2, take some chances. Going to Australia is scary. Leaving your own country, getting away from, especially if your mom's awesome, like Samantha's mom is, got to be all the way on the other side of the world. Take a chance, do something different. And then wait, there's more. While you're doing something different, look for a little something extra. If you're at study abroad, get an internship, even if it's 10 hours a week. Start building your network. Use your time and your connections wisely. Don't waste them, don't spend them, invest them. And then once all that's done, they always say, doesn't matter what you know, it matters who you know. Bullshit. It matters what you do with what you know and who you know. So you talk to people, you have lunches with people, and doors start to open up because old people like me like cool young people that are trying to kick ass. We want to see people striving for excellence. So there's the system. It works in any industry. And you lock into Salesforce, and then you have, and this is the interesting part of Samantha's story. Again, you can go to, how do we find you, Samantha? Because I can't just say Samantha at your company. How would people find you? Instagram? Where do they find you?
Motet.com, or I'm on Instagram at the Samantha Gold.
Okay. Instagram, the Samantha
And
Gold
by
shop.
the way, I love helping and having conversations with young people. So if anyone's listening to this, please send me a DM. I would be more than happy to spend 30 minutes on a call with you.
There you go. That's how it works. All you have to do is go make it happen. So you're still not to Motet yet. You're sitting there at Salesforce learning a bunch of stuff, getting a bunch of training, building your network. And then boom, you move to Charlotte, North Carolina to get into the fashion business.
Well, there were some steps in between, but
Okay. Okay. What were
yeah.
the steps?
I mean, so something that I'd recommend for young people, like if if it's available to you, or in terms of all those applications that you're sending out, look for companies that have a lot of young professionals and have great training in onboarding in place. Like Salesforce was one of those
Yeah.
places. I truly felt like I got an MBA in the
Yeah.
sales world. And there was super fast career progression. And so I was like the fastest promoted sales development rep in the history of Salesforce at the time. Then I was a business development rep where I supported more senior account executives. I got business development rep of the year. Then
Oh,
I was an account executive. I was MVP account executive of the year. Then I moved into, different leadership roles. And again, all of this success is happening because I was like super hungry. I was super driven. I was a team player and collaborative. Things that made me stand out was that I was always willing to help my peers, always willing to be a mentor to new hires. I was always networking with leaders and having conversations and figuring out what was next. And to the point where when I decided that I did want to go back home to Chicago, Salesforce actually paid to relocate me to make that move. And so that was amazing. And I ended up back in Chicago and did a role actually as a sales development rep. So I was literally working with graduates right out of college for 2 years, which was amazing. Working with, so I like truly have a passion for working with young professionals. It was one of my favorite roles that I've had. And then led a team of account executives who were closing deals. At that point, I decided that I wanted to go into enterprise sales, back into an individual contributor capacity. Leadership is wonderful, but you don't have as much flexibility as you would as an individual contributor. And at that point, was settling down and ready to think about having kids and was married to my husband. And so it was during COVID, make the move to Charleston, South Carolina. His job had gone completely remote as well.
Mm.
And then ultimately, I started doing some consulting on the side while I was in an enterprise sales role. So this is how I got into fashion in the first place. I started consulting with a women's clothing company, and it was like a friend who I'd met who was the co-founder of this business, and she was really the designer for the business. And I actually initially met with her, asked her to grab coffee because I was like, I would love to start something one day, potentially something for my children in that space. I'd love to pick your brain on manufacturing. Again, going back to like, just have conversations with people, right? So many people are willing to just give you their time. And so I think just like put yourself out there and don't be afraid to ask for help. And so through that conversation, she started opening up to me about some of the challenges that she was experiencing in the business. And I think again, like going back to like your point about when I talked about like being good at sales and those reasons why, and you're like, that applies to every single industry. That's probably my biggest takeaway in all of this, right? Is that all of these skills are transferable. And
My biggest takeaway is, what did you say? When you love something, it's not a job, and you're excited to get up every day.
yeah,
You figured out how to do that about anything. I think you love everything you do, and I've only known you for 33 minutes. You love everything that you do. You're excited to get up. I think that you could be working in a chicken ranch, cleaning out the coops, and you'd figure out a way to love it. There's that positivity that you
yeah,
know some people have it, some people don't. And by the way, right now, if you're listening, if you're having any emotional issues, make sure you reach out to someone because they can help you get through it. If you're at College Works, you can call Dr. Dorothy. You should have her number, or your DM has it for you for free. But if you got that positive attitude, you get through some negativity, which my wife's had to do to become positive again. That's a big element. And I wrote down just some things where you were talking hungry, driven, collaborative, outgoing, taking a
yeah,
chance. This is just a pattern that you had all your life. And shout out to mom
right.
again for instilling you with that. Some people catch it a little later. Like I always had it all my life. It was kind of focused in a not a very productive way back in New Mexico because I was bored. When I got out of that state, I figured out a way to focus my energy. If you don't have it yet, you got to go get it to be excellent because you're not going to love what you're doing if you're not positive. You're not going to find the positive in things. And if you're not hungry, driven, collaborative, outgoing, taking a chance, good at sales, reaching out, you doing things different, doing a little extra, using your connections, networking, you're not going to move as fast as Samantha did. And then I really want to pause quickly on the
Yeah.
second career change. So we go into tech, you're working in tech, and because you've got this crazy overachiever attitude, did you start a consulting business on the side? You started consulting for people, kind of network consulting?
Yeah, I had different people reaching out to me asking for advice. And I mean, one of the great things about Salesforce, if you're not familiar with it, is that like, yes, it's a customer relationship management solution, but and I think this was why I was very successful at what I did. I was more
Ah,
of a consultant,
you're
right? And
doing the
so
extra in Salesforce. So you're acting as a
as
consultant
a
to
consultant.
get your business. So, and
100%.
consulting is a great way to get exposed to different industries. And
Oh
you're
yeah, it was
consulting
amazing.
different companies that use Salesforce, right? Because everybody uses
100%.
Salesforce. And you figured out through that process, wait a second, I love fashion and have
Yeah, I always loved fashion. I always loved interior design. Those were like passions of mine.
yeah.
And so and I always wanted to like start my own thing. Like I'm like I have so much drive and I would love to be the one to like truly make all of these decisions and steer the direction of a company that it was always on my mind. And so I started just consulting on the side. It just happened really organically with people within my network asking me for advice. And I was like, I could turn this into a business. And so I
Yeah.
started to do that. And I was consulting for this women's clothing company where, at the time, one of the co-founders of the business decided to go and start her own line. And so they really needed someone to come in and run the business. And even though I had no fashion experience, I said, hire me as your CEO.
Wow. Wow. And you got to have some guts. And it
You
worked.
gotta have guts. You
Yeah.
gotta have guts. Because what's the worst that can happen? They say, no, absolutely
Yeah.
not.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you got
Thanks.
hired.
And I got hired.
So
I
wait a
got
second. So you've never really applied for a job.
hired. I mean, no.
Nope.
Well, yes
Nope.
and no. Every job that I've ever gone for, I've gotten.
Okay, that this doesn't always happen, but if you listen to all these adjectives that we're using to describe Samantha, you'll know why it does happen to some. If you're front loading your life and you're kicking butt and you're really making it happen, it can happen pretty fast, somewhat easily. Most people are going to have to work a little harder, and some people have some blips, and that's okay too. It's okay to take a pause. It's okay to get distracted. And Samantha still hasn't even found where she's ending up yet. So you go into the fashion business, you're a CEO, and you must not, I'm not going to ask you how old you are, but you're not that old.
One thing
So
I know about the never getting a rejection, right? And this is like what I would teach anyone because I when I was at Salesforce, especially
you
in
got
leadership
rejected
positions, well, oh my God, I've gotten
all the time.
rejected all the time, in
Yeah.
terms of sales, don't get me wrong. But it doesn't phase me at all because I'm so used to it. I mean, by the way, for people listening, like when I was at Salesforce in those early days, I was making 100 calls a day and maybe 95 people were rejecting me.
Yeah.
So I've gotten, and that's just one day.
Yeah.
Okay. But
It helps you with entrepreneurship because the road
yeah,
to yes is paved with no.
and you get such thick skin where it doesn't even, I don't even think about it anymore when
No,
someone says
no,
no.
no.
I actually say, thanks so much for letting me know. Or, by the way, if people are listening, like you have to be so good at objection handling.
Yeah.
All of this is like, especially when it comes to yourself, no
Yeah.
one is going to be a bigger advocate for you than you,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so, my advice to anyone, no matter what job you're going for, at the end of that interview, you need to ask them when they're like, do you have any final questions for us? I would say yes. Do you have any hesitation with me moving forward in this interview process or with hiring me for this position?
Oh, that's a
You
good
have
question.
to do that. Okay. Because that gives you an opportunity to address any of their concerns. They
Yeah.
might say, yes, you have this experience, but you don't have experience here. And you can say, well, actually, this project that I led in XYZ, and you have an opportunity to address it, right?
Yeah.
There's
Otherwise, they're thinking it and they're just going to call you and tell you that was the reason. So, to your point about
100%.
being the CEO, if you don't ask, you don't get.
And they had objections. They
Yeah.
had objections.
Yeah. Yeah.
A
Yeah.
100%. They actually
And
wanted
you're
to,
and you're looking at a sales job. You better ask that question.
right. They
Yeah.
they wanted actually to make me their chief revenue officer.
Wow.
Um, and I said, no, thank you. I don't want that position.
Yeah.
I want to be a CEO. And here at the time I was already consulting for them. So I said, here's all the areas that I'm helping you in. And I'm already basically doing it,
Yeah.
just give me the title and pay me for it. And
Yeah.
here's where I know we can take the business. And so they did. And she actually had someone who was a top executive at a big corporate who was consulting her. And she was like, well, this person has hesitations. I said, can I get on the phone with that person? I would love
Wow.
an opportunity to speak with them.
Don't let people think negative things about you, or even don't wonder if people are thinking negative things about you.
100%.
Go to them directly. So you're a fierce conversationalist. And how long were you in that business for?
I was there for about a year and a half.
A year and a half. And then what happened? This is
And
when the
then
magic happens.
and then we were in Charleston, South Carolina, and my husband was like, I'm so bored.
Oh
And
no.
he was working remote and he was like, I want to be in a big city again. And so we were like, well, where do we want to go? And he started, because I had this background in Sydney and in tech, he actually started again, leaning into his own network and my own network from the past. And he connected with some of my former colleagues in Sydney. And they were like, listen, man, we don't have opportunities in Charleston, but get to Sydney and we'd love to hire you. And so that's essentially what planted the seed back in our minds. And
Okay.
it took about probably like 6 months from when we had the idea to be able to execute it. But again, like he was having conversations with companies over here while we were in the United States. And it was just like, they'd be like, you seem great, but why don't you call me when you get here? Not really understanding like the visa requirements or
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
process.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so then an opportunity opened up for a promotion at Zendesk. And, he had the support of his manager, and he was actually like rookie of the year when he was hired there in a mid-market account executive position. And he went for it and was able to like truly impress, the team here, and was able to get a relocation package again from the company because he'd, been a top performer and proven himself. they sponsored our entire family to be able to come here. And so for me at that point, I knew with the move to Australia, I wouldn't be able to continue in the CEO position of the women's clothing company. And I knew also that I always wanted to start my own thing. And essentially, through the sale of our house in Charleston, that gave me the startup costs that I needed
Mhm.
to launch Motet. And so, kind of like stars aligned from that perspective.
Okay, so mom's got to be super bummed. She did all these wonderful things to
Oh,
raise you right. You go to college like an hour and a half away, and then smack her right in the face as a thank you, and move back to Australia with two grandkids. Oh
I
my God.
know, I know.
Tell me that those aren't her only two grandkids.
They are.
Oh no. And do you have any siblings?
I do, but my brother's not having kids. So it's
Oh my goodness. I am so sorry to hear this, Mom. And Kennedy, if you're listening, you are not moving to London. My daughter went to London on study abroad. You are not moving there. You're staying right next to us. Okay, so this is where it gets crazy. You've had this corporate life, you've gotten all this training, you've kind of proven your skills, you figured out what you love, you figured out your niche, you didn't figure it out while you're in college, you didn't figure it out a few years after college. You had to go on a path to find your true passion. And how did you start your company? Because everybody listening wants to know how you start a company when you're 21 years old while you're still in school, which doesn't normally happen. You normally got to go through a path like this with these weird
yeah,
serendipitous wins, and you're
yeah.
moving to Sydney and you decide, I'm going to start a clothing company. How did you do it? And where is it at now?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, truly, it was born out of, me becoming a mom and having these two kids and seeing, what was out there in terms of, purchasing basic styles for them. So, like zipper onesies, if, probably not a lot of people listening that have babies, but for me as a mom, I just wanted something that was like super easy to throw on that they could wear to sleep or, during the daytime that also looked beautiful. And I had such a hard time finding things like that. And so it was all like cheesy prints, sequins, bold colors, slogans. And I'm just not about that. Like I wanted something that felt like elevated, was print based, incorporated my love for interior design, and also use like sustainable, super soft fabric like bamboo. And I
Mhm.
truly couldn't find anything like it out there. And so for me, I mean, the first step in the process was figuring out a manufacturer that I was going to partner with.
And where did you get it manufactured?
It's manufactured in China.
Oh, no. Okay, so you get a manufacturer in China. I spent, by the way, the day yesterday with a couple of my buddies that are big time retailers and big time brand CEOs. And I was listening to all the Chinese stuff. So we're going to get to the Chinese stuff in a second because it's never smooth. No matter what, there's always crazy stuff throwing wrenches in your plans. So you get your manufacturer and you go down and you meet with the factories and you figure
No,
out what'd you do?
I never went there. I never went
Oh,
there. I actually, so again, like at the women's clothing company, I saw, I saw exactly like how the process worked in terms of, the communication with the factory and like it was
yeah,
through WhatsApp. I communicate with my factory through WhatsApp.
yeah.
How you source a manufacturer. I think there are like many ways to do that. You can go through an agent. I did not. I went direct to them.
Because you
Someone
knew them from your previous company.
no, because
No.
most factories really specialize. And so my
Okay.
factory that I went with really specializes in bamboo fabric in the children's space
Okay.
versus the factories that we were working with at the women's clothing company. It was like cotton in India and then knits for China, but it was all women's clothing. And
Yeah.
so I needed to find a new factory and a new partnership. Again, I would say anyone listening, like starting a business is going to take longer than you anticipate. I thought, I'll find this factory, I'll be up and running in a few months. Like, haha, jokes on me. No way.
Yeah.
I end up interviewing and sampling probably over 12 factories.
Yeah, because you got to get the
And
samples too. They got to
you
make it
got
and ship you the
to,
samples.
you got to get the fabric right, then you got to
Yeah.
get the samples right.
Mm.
Everything takes a lot longer than you anticipate. And so definitely like bake that into your plans. But also, I would say be really smart in terms of like if you're interested in launching a product based business, in terms of the sampling process. I was super impatient and I would like see these photos online and I'd be like, this is going to be the one. I'm going to place this large sample order. And then I would get the product and I would have wasted a lot of money having done a larger order. And I could have realized with one product that it was
Yeah.
not going to be the right fit for me.
Yeah.
And so I would say like start small from that perspective. And they're willing to work with you. Like if you're, and I think again, like with me, it was easier because I had this experience running this women's clothing company. So it gave me some credibility for them to take me seriously. And they didn't charge me these exorbitant, costs for these samples. But ultimately I knew right away when I like found my factory because it was just like night and day in terms of the quality, but also in terms of like the communication and the relationship that I had with the factory. And they just felt like they would be like really strong partners. And so once I found the factory, another another piece of advice is for people listening, again, like the legal implications. For me, it was like twofold, right? Like I had no idea about legal implications in the children's clothing space, which there are many. And so you should really be mindful of that depending on what industry that you're going into. For
Okay.
me, for instance, like the clothing has to be snug fitting, otherwise it has to be treated with flame resistance.
Wow.
And that's a requirement in the United States for children's clothing. Also, from a trademark perspective, I actually had a totally different name for Motet when I launched. And I had gotten the website and I was like, this name's available, nobody has it. And then, I was like pretty far down the process and someone was like, you've trademarked that, right? Like you've checked with the trademark attorney. And I was like, totally no.
You got to pay the $7,500 because they
Yeah,
do the searches.
they do the searches and it was not a viable option. And
Wow.
so I had to change everything. I had to change my labels, my hang tags, my
Wow.
branding, right? And change the name completely. And guess what? ChatGPT named my company.
What?
Um,
It did?
it did
You asked
literally.
ChatGPT to come up with a name that would work, that would pass the
Oh, I
trademark?
asked ChatGPT to come up with like 100 names, right?
Okay, okay,
But
okay.
ultimately, I loved like for me, my whole brand is based on prints, and so like petite motifs, and so that's
Okay.
kind of what Motet is based off of.
Okay.
Literally, my trademark attorney was like, "You need to come up with a made up word, okay? Make
Okay, yeah.
up your own word." Like I think that's where we're at in terms of the
Wow.
number of trademarks that are currently available. Like you need to make up your own word.
Okay. So you make up your own word, you find the factory, you go through this process of discovery, of spending, they always say twice as much time and twice as much money, but it's at least twice as much time and probably three times as much money. Uh,
Yeah.
and you get ready to launch. And how did the launch go?
Honestly, the launch was amazing. And I think that
And
one, well,
it was in May, the launch, March, you said.
March 14th. And,
March.
and the main reason that it was so successful, my launch, is because over the last year, I truly built this brand in public. So I was sharing online, like I literally had the moms in the inner circle voting on new names for my company, right? Like
Oh,
I was involving them in the process every step of
yeah,
the way, being
yeah.
like, hey,
And it's
biggest
more
mistake
fun for you.
was so much more fun for me. It
And
was
it's
so much,
better. I mean, can you imagine sitting as an entrepreneur with maybe
yeah,
a couple staff trying to answer all these questions when you have 1,500 people that are super
right,
smart and are in the market and in the understanding and in the thick of it to give you
right,
some feedback because people want to help, just like the person that gave you
right.
the first chance at Salesforce,
A
just
hundred.
like people that gave you the chance
I
at
mean, so
consulting.
many of the things that with my business, for instance, I had regular tags, right? And I asked the moms in my community, I was like, what would you like to see differently or changes, in terms of children's clothing? And one of them was like, hey, no more scratchy, itchy tags. Like they really irritate my children and baby's skin. And so that's how I came up with heat labels that are
Yeah.
literally like pressed on, no tags, but it still has my branding. And that was a
Yeah.
suggestion from a mom in my inner circle.
Wow. And she knew about heat labels too?
Yeah, yeah.
Wow. So you
Yeah.
didn't know about heat labels? She
These
brought it to
moms
you.
in these inner circles are amazing. I mean, literally, I was like, "Hey, I would love to be on some podcast to talk, about Motet and
Uh,
build some brand awareness. Do you guys have any recommendations in terms of podcasts that I should reach out to?"
yeah.
And one of them was like, "Come on my podcast. I have a
Wow.
podcast." You know what I
Wow.
mean? It's just
Yeah.
so
Well,
cool. And
you're solving each other's problems. You have a
right,
problem getting the great business that everybody's going to love, and they have a problem where same problem you had. They can't find what they're looking for, and they have some insight into what can make your idea even better. That's
yeah.
absolutely. I mean,
Well, and
if you're,
everything is print based as well. And so and I've thought about, potentially getting investors down the line. And I actually had some conversations recently with some venture capitalists, and they were like, something that's so unique about how I've built this and co-created this with this mom community is that it really helps me reduce risk, which is key, right? From an investor perspective, because moms, before I place any bulk orders or spend money, because as a product-based business, most of my costs go towards inventory. I'm polling my audience so I know exactly what they like. And so when I have three prints, right, like a pink, a blue, a yellow one, and I can say, hey, out of these three, what's your favorite? And 90% say the pink one,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
what I'm going with.
Yeah. Yeah. You have your built-in focus group. You have your built-in creative design department. You have your built-in innovation department, and they're just doing it because they want what you want. You have a
Right.
line to, and I haven't thought of this idea. This is Samantha's idea, but if you're listening right now, I mean, you can do that with any business, and it might not be. And if you go back to the beginning, it wasn't the full Instagram feed that she's launching out to everybody. It was a select group. It's the group that wants to be part of it. It was
Yeah.
creating an audience out of your friends and your social media. I
Yeah.
guess it would be friends, followers.
Yeah.
They're not
Just
followers
adding them
anymore.
as close friends on Instagram. That's all I
Yeah.
do. And now they tell me they get super excited because they see on their Instagram, they can see this little like green star that shows that there's a new poll. And they're like, I get so excited every day when that pops up
Yeah, yeah.
to weigh
And it's
in, right?
making a difference. And so you are. How are you dealing with the tariffs?
So my factory ships everything DDP, and what that stands for is delivered duty paid. And so I am in a unique situation where my factory is, bearing the load of those increased tariffs, and they're the
Mm.
ones that are covering those costs. And so far, they have not increased my unit prices for the product. And so I'm very lucky that I'm in that situation. I brought it up to them, and so far, I haven't seen a price increase from that perspective.
Wow. Okay, that's fantastic. So you're very prepared. You've spent a lot of time to find the right partner. You had a lot of knowledge from this past businesses, so you didn't accidentally come across duty prepaid freight. But
Here's
you're
the
getting
other thing I would say, right? Like to anyone listening, and I think whether it's tariffs, whether it's anything, right? There's always going to be external factors
yeah,
in any situation in life.
yeah,
Focus on what you can control,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
These things that are outside of your control. Of course, you want to make smart decisions. Personally, and this is my opinion, I don't think they're going to continue where they're at.
yeah.
I think that, hopefully, the two countries will come to some sort of negotiation and agreement. I think a lot of people, we go straight to a place of fear and we
Mm.
can make impulsive decisions. If I wasn't in this situation, I also am like very lucky that majority of my bulk order had also arrived prior to these changes.
Yeah.
Um, and so
And
all of
your
my
next bulk order might be after these changes. It might be
100%.
after the
And
correction.
I truly think that's probably what's going to happen.
Yeah, yeah.
Honestly, my warehouse is in Denver, Colorado. I have a third party logistics company that handles all of my shipping.
Mm.
And so it was like a week before these tariffs went into place that my bulk order had arrived,
Wow.
my recent one. And so I got really lucky with that. There's so many companies that are not in that situation.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, potentially like pausing and waiting and seeing and having exploratory conversations with other factories would be the smart move. For me, it took me so long to find this factory. And so I'm going to, for now, like stick with them,
Yeah.
and hope that also, by the time that the next large bulk order arrives, that some of this has been worked out.
Right. Right. Okay. Well, there we go. That is the story. That is a wild and crazy life you've had in a very few years. Again, I hope you're taking those kids of yours back to Denver when you visit that warehouse and seeing their grandma, because I'm feeling for her.
I can tell you we have no plans to take them back to the United States
Oh,
anytime
yes.
soon. My daughter on the airplane over here had
Yeah.
a meltdown for 24 hours to the point where when we got off the plane, right, she was so hysterical. This was the only perk. They pulled us to the front of the line in customs because they
Yes.
were like,
Yes.
get
Yes.
these people
Yes.
out
Yes.
of here.
Okay, so there is a rule, and if you, some of the audience does have babies, here's the safe rule: no crossing oceans before they're double digits, because they don't make children's Ambien. As soon as they start making children's Ambien, take them across the ocean. I made the same mistake, but I gave my kid Benadryl, and I gave him too much Benadryl, which has the opposite effect. And so he was wide awake for the entire plane flight, screaming, and my wife's crying. I'm totally stressed out. But the cool thing was when we got off the plane, all these people kept looking back at us and looking back at us, and she's crying. And we got off the plane. The people that were looking back at us said, "You guys did a good job." And they were being supportive. They weren't looking with nasty nasty vibes like we thought they were. I just had this faith in humanity, but I also had a lack of faith in my own decision making because you don't take kids across the ocean. Okay, mom, time to get a plane ticket. You got to fly there. I totally sympathize with Samantha now. Well, I'm going to ask you one more question, then we're going to let you get back to your morning in Australia.
Yeah.
If you look back after through this illustrious career of kind of taking advantage of everything, was there a sacrifice that you look back on and you're like, I remember when I thought I'm going to go do A, but I really should do B, and you sacrificed A and went and did B, and you're like, oh my God, that's the greatest thing I ever did. I'm so glad I made that sacrifice.
You know, I mean, I feel like all of it, right? I think it's just for me, and don't get me wrong, like I think, you might look at me and say, "Oh, she's so positive, she doesn't have any problems." Like I have had fear and anxiety my whole life, right? And so I think it's like I wish I would have worried less
Mm,
and just trusted the process and
mm,
known that, whatever decision you make, right? Like it's exactly where you're meant to be.
mm.
And there are, cooler things and more exciting things than you ever could have imagined on the other side.
If you have purity of heart, clarity of intention, sincerity of action, let the outcome go and enjoy the process. Well,
Yeah.
Samantha, that was awesome. I had a great time. I appreciate you coming on the show. I appreciate you reaching out to me and asking to come on the show because that was an awesome episode. I look forward to hearing more about you. And I'm going to send people to find that magazine on the South
Yes.
Store of Chicago. Thank you for coming on the show and thank you for being on the Edge of Excellence.
Thank you so much for having me.